So let me introduce you to everyone. Today we are joined in community quarantine by Los Angeles County Probation Department Residential Treatment Services Bureau Chief Jennifer Kaufman. Chief Kaufman, welcome.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me. Sorry about that. We tried to get on with our own department's Instagram and it wasn't working. So thank you for having me.
No problem. Thanks for joining us. So I'm very much looking forward to this conversation because it gives me an opportunity to get to know you and learn more about your journey to becoming chief within the LA County Probation Department. So let's start at the beginning. Where are you from?
So I am from Covina, California. A lot of people know it more by being close to San Dimas and Raging Waters. And there's a West Covina as well. And so that's where I grew up. That's where I was raised. And that's where my husband and I and our daughter, our other kids are grown now. So they're out of the state.
So in Covina, are you one of several siblings? Do you have
Yeah, I
brothers and
actually
sisters?
have, yeah, I'm the oldest. So I have a younger brother and a younger sister. They both live pretty local to me. So that's a blessing. My parents recently retired, so they moved away to Arizona. So it's just us in our little community right now.
So your parents are from Covina, or did they migrate there from someplace?
You know, they actually, I think they both grew up in Alhambra, but they actually met in West Covina when they were going to high school. So not too far away. They established themselves first in Glendora, which is still relatively close to that community, and then moved to Covina as I went into middle school. And so right after high school is when I met my husband. He actually went to the same high school. We didn't know each other in high school. And so when we got ready to have children, we moved back closer to our parents that they could help us out with the kids.
Now, you know, it's rare. I talk to a lot of people. It's rare for me to meet someone who not only is from Los Angeles, but their parents are from here too. Usually people have moved someplace, from around the country to come here. So you must know LA like the back of your hand.
I think actually more from working in the county. You know, I always like to say that we probably know the best places to eat, people that work in the county, because we get to travel so much. And so there's not a lot of restaurants that I probably haven't been to.
So tell me about your upbringing. Tell me about what it was like growing up in your household. What were your early interests as a kid as you entered into high school?
So my dad was super athletic. And so I came from a family of having both parents. I was very fortunate. My dad basically was the coach for me and my sister in all types of sports, soccer, basketball, but our real passion was softball. So my sister and I were both softball players, played travel ball, went to high school, went to CIF, did all those good things. When it came to college, though, that's when, we didn't want to end up going to school for sports. And at the time, my dad had opened a produce company. And so right after high school, I went to work for him and he helped me pay for college by working for him. So that was really great.
So why didn't you want to continue playing softball once you got to college? I'm assuming you liked it a lot.
Yeah, I did. But, I think as you get older and sports sometimes takes up so much of your time growing up and not having the opportunities that other kids do on the weekends. It's a full-time commitment, working out, going, doing all those things. Plus, I tore my ACL on my left knee right before our final game in CIF. We actually ended up
Oh.
winning, but yeah, so I didn't get to play the last game, but which was really heartbreaking. But I think at that time I was like, I had it with sports.
Well, I can understand that coming off of a major injury. So you decided to go to Cal Poly Pomona.
Right. I actually started at Cal State Fullerton. And to be quite truthful, being on the semester system was really difficult for me because I'm a procrastinator, unfortunately. And so, yeah, that semester system really killed me. I needed to go to a quarter system that was really fast paced. And, within every 10 weeks, you're transitioning over. So that worked out a lot better for me. So that's where I ended up graduating from.
So the quarter system is the main reason that caused you to go to Cal Poly Pomona?
Yeah, and I had taken some time off as well. My dad was, he had his business, so I was helping him. And in that between that was interesting, which kind of leads into the story of why I'm in probation. Growing up, I always wanted to be a psychologist, psychiatrist. And so I went to school. I started out as a psychology major. And after I started working for my dad, I had a mentor, and he was our controller. And so he taught me a lot about bookkeeping. And so it kind of changed my interest in that respect. I'm very analytical. And so naturally for me, I like to understand why, we weren't making money or figure out what the problem was and try to resolve that. And so I ended up switching to accounting as a major in business administration. And then after that, my dad sold his business and I had to stay on for, a year. But afterwards, I was looking in the county to get a accounting job. And at the time they weren't hiring, they were in a hiring freeze. And so I got a call from probation. And I at first I really didn't understand too much what they did, but I got hired and I came in as an auditor. And from there, I learned more about all the different programs and operations that probation officers did. And I transitioned over into operations and became a pretty, a sworn member and just rose through the ranks in that way.
So how did you get a call from probation? What made them call you?
You know what? I guess it was fate because, it was out of the blue. They were borrowing a list from the Auditor Controller's Office to hire. They needed some auditors for Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act. And so that's really where I came in and I learned, we would go out and we would evaluate programs and learn about what the probation officers did in the schools and learn about what the community providers did and talk to the kids and talk to the families. And just that's kind of what started me on my path then to move into operations.
So you'd have to say that chance is what brought you into probation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I probably didn't really know, I had never been in trouble that I actually got caught as a kid. And so,
Same here.
yeah, right. I mean, we all do silly things when we're kids that probably could have landed us into some type of predicament with the law. But fortunately, that didn't happen to me. And, as I grew up, so I didn't really know at the time what probation did. I was just looking for a job, with good benefits and things like that. And when I got the call, I interviewed and got hired.
Well, you're the second chief in 2 days that can point to fate as to how they got involved in law enforcement. I just interviewed USC Department of Public Safety Chief John Thomas, and he had applied for an LAPD position or LA Fire Department. He said, whichever one called me first, that's where I was going to go. So I find it fascinating that you were destined to be in probation. And that answers one of my questions, because I was going to ask you what made you gravitate toward law enforcement. And then I was going to ask you why probation. It sounds like probation chose you, but it's interesting that you point to the fact that you were a psychology major, as was I, and you're fascinated in why things happen, why people behave the way they do. And so I know that probation has taken a turn in general from just kind of incarcerating people and letting them stew in incarceration toward rehabilitation. How important is that for you to be a part of this behavior change movement inside of probation, being that that's really where your roots are?
Yeah, I think actually I've been in the department almost 17 years now. And I think they were already in that trajectory when I started on, because that was really the impetus behind the grant and the funding, is to get more community-based partnerships to rehabilitate youth in their own community. And so, I was very fortunate to know a lot of people in the department who already had that philosophy. And so really, I think, that's one of the reasons why I like to work on the juvenile side of the house, because we have adult and juvenile. And, just seeing kids, I've had kids of my own, and seeing them, change as they grow, and the way they think, and, their value system and who they hang out with and all of those things, and just being really able to help them along the way. I mean, I know peer association is so important during the teenage years. And so, there is always that opportunity. I'm sure you had, peer influences when you were a kid growing up and, had that probably, got asked to do things that you didn't agree with, or that your family helped you through that. And some of these kids don't have that. And so I like to be there and try to be that person, develop programs, help the communities build themselves up to help kids thrive in them, increase positive youth development. I know that's one of the big terms in like our partnership with you, and how we, taking kids out to these events to show them what life, what so many different experiences that they can avail to themselves, and have them have a different perspective of law enforcement, that, we're there to help. We're not there just to penalize, that we really want to see them make a change, and do everything we can to support them.
So when you first got into probation, Chief, did you work with adults and juveniles and then make the decision that you wanted to stay with juveniles?
Well, typically, when you get promoted, you can go to either or. You don't necessarily have that a luxury of having a choice. They'll usually, if there's an opening, that's where you're needed. And so, I think 2 assignments before this assignment, I was actually part of the AB 109, the prison reform. And so I was one of the managers that was part of that. And I wouldn't say that I disliked it. I would just say that my passion is dealing with the younger people. I think helps keep me young, keep my perspective youthful. And so I just, I'll go where the winds sail, but I that's just where my passion, my heart lies, is with the kids.
Well, obviously, same here. Talk to me about your progression from day one in probation, and some of the people that you've met along the way that served as a mentor to you to put you on the path to becoming bureau chief.
Oh my goodness, there's so many. I've been fortunate. I've probably worked almost every bureau now within the department, except for our juvenile hall operation. And so, I think a couple of the ones that really stand out to me, he's retired now, but his name was Jitahadi Amara. And he was the one that really had this vision of what juvenile justice reform looked like. And so he led a lot of that initiative. He's the one that brought experts in to help us grow as a department. We went through what's called camp redesign, about really assessing what the needs are to find the root cause of delinquency. He brought in the theoretical model that we are driven by now, and then also Felicia Cotton's really been a great mentor. She is probably one of the first people that I'd seen that was a female that was really just visionary in terms of this work. And so I really looked up to her. There's just so many. I mean, in every experience, I think that I've seen, somebody that's helped me grow as a person, help me see things from a different perspective. But I really love it. I think the dynamics here, we're a really tight-knit family. We're a team. And, there's just so many mentors to be learned from in this organization.
Well, you brought up a piece that I wanted to focus on a little bit. Law enforcement typically is a male-dominated profession, and since a lot of people don't know very much about probation, is probation the same from a gender standpoint as the other law enforcement agencies, in that it's male-dominated? And if that's the case, how have you been able to navigate your way through that environment to rise up to the point of being chief?
Yeah, so that's a really loaded question. My assignment, I was in professional standards a couple years ago, and so that was over the background. And so what I started noticing is there was a lot more females that were applying for the job. And so I want to say that, where I can, from my lens over the residential treatment, which is our camp system, is I would say that's a good, probably half and half now. It's probably half female, half male. I think part of it is that, women, this job is a little different in law enforcement in terms of we are we wear both hats, the social worker as well as law enforcement. And so, I think that we bring a different dynamic, a different perspective to the work. I think the clients are predominantly male still, so that's a little different. But, women by, nature are nurturing. And so I think they gravitate a lot to this work because, again, they're influenced by being able to make changes in people's lives. So I think the way I've navigated is, quite truthfully, I, thought about this. I really never thought about gender in my assignments. I've always been treated with the utmost respect. I've never felt like I was not chosen because I was a female, or that I had to work harder to prove myself or anything like that. I work with a bunch of amazing men and women. And so I guess I've just been really blessed.
It sounds like it, and I want to share that the data and feedback that we've received from our juvenile game changer participants, not just here, but around the country, they prefer communicating with female members of law enforcement. And the reason is they feel like the female officers listen to them. They give them a chance to explain themselves as compared to the males. And I've been saying for the last several years that we need far more female leadership in government and in our elected officials because of that, the ability to communicate a little bit better than males from a listening standpoint. And so I'm happy to hear that the probation department in LA County is so diverse from a gender standpoint, because the other agencies, they're not near half. There is no half and half yet. Oh yeah. So I'm glad to hear that. That's fascinating to me. So take me through the 6 sites that you oversee. You refer to them as camps. I want to welcome our new viewers. We're interviewing Bureau Chief Jennifer Kaufman within the LA County Probation Department. Talk to us about those camps and how they're run and what some of the daily operations look like, and how many probationers, not probationers, how many juveniles do you have in custody in these 6 camps?
So, with the COVID-19, our population's been decreasing as kids are getting rehabilitated. We are trying to make sure that they go home because, of course, they're worried, just like their parents are worried about them. The 6 facilities are located throughout the county. We have 3 that are in the San Dimas, Laverne area, which is off the 210 freeway. I'm not sure how familiar everybody is, but we have 1 in Lancaster that actually will be transitioning back to Malibu. That's our new site, which is called Campus Kilpatrick. And so we're really excited. It was unfortunately devastated in the fires a couple of years ago. And then thereafter, there was some rains that did a lot of damage, but it's a state-of-the-art facility. So we're really hoping to get back there soon. And then I have a facility that's a female facility that's in Santa Clarita. And 3, 4, 5. And then 1 that's in East Los Angeles, and that's a locked residential treatment facility for kids that have more severe social and emotional issues, and need a lot more intensive mental health services. So right now I would say we have about 200 kids or so, give and take. That's changing every day. Unfortunately, we do have some kids that are continuing, to commit crimes. And so they'll have their mandatory detentions for some of them. And so if a judge orders them to rehabilitation in one of our camp systems, then they'll be sent to one of those 6 facilities.
Well, it sounds like a lot of work. And so for your probation officers that work at these facilities, as chief, what are some of the characteristics that you look for in a person to hire them on to have them work at these camps?
So typically people get hired through working in the juvenile halls, and then they promote up into the camps. But some of the characteristics we're looking for when we're hiring is somebody that's empathetic, somebody that believes that, behaviors can be changed, believes in rehabilitation. A lot of them, we were trying to seek people that have gone to school for psychology, social work. So they have that educational background. But really just having an open heart and, wanting to work with the kids in our system. So that's really the characteristics that we look for.
So does juvenile hall serve as intake for the probation department? And once that intake process takes place, then they're placed in a camp after their trial and whatnot?
Correct. So our juvenile halls are, similar to what people would on the adult side as jails. And so that's where kids are detained for pre-adjudication. And then once the judge orders a disposition, then they can go to suitable placement. They could go back home with supportive services, or they can go to a residential treatment facility. And that's our camp system.
Well, that's fascinating. So when you talk about the camp system and the overall goal to bring about behavior change, I want to talk about the tenets behind that behavior change process, but I want to start with the parents and the guardians. What role do they play in that process to bring about permanent behavior change in the youth that spend time at the camps?
So yeah, we usually, a lot of that was happening at the transition point. Our secondary officers, we call our aftercare officers. It could be one of many different units. It could be an intensive gang unit. It could be a suitable placement officer or a camp to community transition officer. So they get involved in the case early on. And then while the youth is detained in camp, then we do a lot of family therapy. We have Department of Mental Health, our LA County Office of Education, and our Juvenile Court Health Services. And so we all come together and we form what's called a multidisciplinary team. And so right from the beginning, we bring the parent, the youth, the guardians. If there's a supportive adult, a coach, somebody else will bring into this MDT and talk to the youth about, what are their treatment goals? What are some things they want to achieve? What are some things that the court wants to see them achieve, like, getting their high school diploma, and whether or not they're interested in college classes, because we offer that also in camp. Sometimes we dual enroll, or if the youth's older and can graduate, then we go ahead and enroll them in a college course. And so all of those things come into play. And then while the youth is there, then we do cognitive behavioral therapy. A lot of things that we're trying to implement right now before the COVID, unfortunately, was a lot of positive youth development. I know that, I think a lot of the excursions that we're trying to take kids out and give them new experiences. Luckily, you guys gave us tickets. I can't remember if it was the Kings game, I believe it was, as well as hockey. Yeah. And then was it baseball or basketball? I know there's been so many opportunities. So we try to take the kids out and show them what it's like to experience these events. And also that's a reward, a pro-social award for good behavior. And so, yeah, that's really what it looks like.
Well, I'm fascinated by that process because my background is in behavior change, and Game Changer itself is rooted in behavioral psychology. So it's important to me to understand what that process looks like inside of probation. When you talk about behavior change, you describe what appears to be a comprehensive approach toward bringing about behavior change with the youth that are at the camps. So please clarify, every single separate camp has LA County Office of Education, Department of Mental Health Services in each site?
Yes, they are co-located at the site. And so it's always a multi-team approach to whatever the youth needs are. And luckily we have Juvenile Court Health Services under our Department of Health Services. So at the juvenile halls, it's 24 hours. They have a doctor and nurses, and at the camps, we have them till 10 p.m. So anything, typically kids are in bed after 10 p.m. If it's an emergency, we would call 911, but we have the ability to call a doctor and send a kid out, at any time.
So these camps sound like they're self-sufficient little cities to me, where everything that you could need to bring about positive behavior change in a youth is there for them. Is that accurate?
Well, I think you said that earlier, the big biggest piece is their family and what's going to happen in the community. And so that piece, obviously, we can't, you know, make it so that, you know, simulate that inside the camp. And so that's one of the areas that we're trying to improve. Right before this happened, we were getting ready to co-case manage with mental health clinicians in the community to start working with the family before the youth comes out of the camp. And so prior to that, usually, you know, tied to funding, if a kid's detained, they don't have access to their Medi-Cal or other type of benefits, and so their family can't benefit. But we found a way that we could partner with our Department of Mental Health in the community to do that work, you know, with the family while they're there, and then to also help them get to the facilities, because, you know, sometimes these are not convenient, and in LA, you know, the travel and traffic and things like that makes it difficult for them to be able to, you know, especially if they have financial issues, to be able to be transported. And so we're hoping that that will be another way of getting the parent and whomever from the family to come to the camp and start working with the youth there, as well as do their own work in the home, you know, to work on their parenting skills, any issues that they have in the home that need to be resolved. Also get them prepared for youth when they come home, helping them do the enrollment in school, if they're going to need service as well in the community, and just do all around that case management, because these kids may have younger siblings in the home too. And so hopefully that will be another preventative measure of working with the family early on.
So the LA County Probation Department, is it the largest probation department in the country? Are there more people in this system in LA than any other place in the country outside of maybe New York?
Yeah, you know, I wouldn't know in terms of the population, but I think in terms of the size and as many officers and administrative positions that we have, we're the largest. But, you know, I don't follow statistics on populations, you know, to see if Florida maybe had more kids detained than we did. And so that's something interesting to take a look at. But I definitely know we're the biggest in terms of positions and budget and things like that.
I would have to think so. I mean, it sounds like a massive, there's a lot of people capital that goes into the daily operations. What are some of the biggest challenges overseeing these 6 sites for you?
You know, I think these sites were built a very long time ago. And at the time, you know, when they didn't really understand about not mixing the different risk levels, they, you know, had kids that were incorrigibles, runaways, truants, actually going to the system. So you had a mix of high risk and low risk. And what we found out is doing that actually makes a low risk high risk.
Right.
As well as, so yeah, so the facility, the design of the facilities isn't, it's a large dorm where you have, you know, up to 50, 60 kids in there in dorm room style. And so that's really what we want to change. We want to make it more of a small model, which we know works better, a more where it's like their own home environment. And so that's just one of the challenges right now, is trying to retrofit those buildings to be more like our campus Kilpatrick, which is, you know, the ultimate state-of-the-art site.
Well, I'm interested in taking a trip to several of the sites to see for myself. I believe I went to the Lancaster site a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so that's, oh no, go ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that that site is where our temporary youth and staff from Campus Kilpatrick are relocated. But as soon as we're able to go back, we will not be housing youth at that facility anymore. I'm sure you saw it. It's large. It was actually comprised of 6 camps on each side.
Oh, wow.
So that just goes to show you how much our numbers has significantly decreased, with trying to keep kids in the community and giving them the resources that they need there, so that we don't have to detain kids and remove them from their families.
So one of my closest friends is the assistant chief of probation in San Diego, and he said that their approach is to do their jobs to the point where they phase themselves out of a job. I don't know too many other professions that want that, but I want to know if you share in that mentality, and what type of person that you have to be to want to bring that about.
Oh, no, I definitely wholeheartedly agree with that. I want kids to be able to thrive in their own communities. I don't want to have to lock up kids. I don't want to have to do rehabilitation. I want them to be able to rehabilitate with their families and their community. And unfortunately, right now, especially in these economic times, sometimes that's not easy. And so this past year, we've been working with a lot of the small grassroots organizations that sometimes lack the infrastructure to be able to apply for large grants and funding. And so we've been trying to do a lot of capacity building around that so that they do have the resources to work in their community and to hopefully spend a lot more time in the prevention arena so that kids don't cross over into the delinquency side of the house.
Well, it's a noble aspect of law enforcement that most people aren't aware of, and I wanted to make sure that people hear about that, hear it straight from you. With your operations being so big, and I'm sure that you have counterparts, maybe not just in LA County Probation Department, but other departments around the country. Who are some of your peers that you communicate with the most, and why?
So I think, I'm not sure if you were talking about in San Diego, but Scott Weezar is one of my peers and counterparts. We actually met at a training called Command College a couple years ago. And so I know he's risen through the ranks in San Diego, and he's always a resource I can rely on. There's a couple organizations that are that send out, Google groups. And so we a lot of times bounce things off each other. I have some contacts in Riverside that I work with, Jason Beam, and they're just great assets in Orange County. I mean, we all know so many people just pick up the phone and talk to each other, but really we've seen, like with the technology enhancements, that the Google, like a daily we'll get an email that says, how many of you counties are doing X? How many of you counties are doing Y? Do you have a policy to help me do this? And so that's really where a lot of the information is shared across the board with each other. It's called CAPIA, and there's a CAPSA group for the community piece.
And talk about the training that you had to go through to become chief. And I ask this question because when I speak to chiefs within police agencies or sheriff agencies, the one thing that they all seem to have in common is that they all graduated from the FBI National Academy. Is there something similar to that within the world of probation, where if you aspire to be amongst leadership in probation, that this is a stop that you have to make? This is training that you must receive if you ever want to become chief?
So in the penal code, I think it's section 6035, it establishes the Board of State and Community Corrections as basically the oversight similar to law enforcement. It's called Peace Officer Standards and Training. So it's STC, Standards for Training and Corrections, is our legislative body that oversees the training requirements for our positions. And so every law enforcement goes through post PCA 32 to give you arrest powers. But for STC, to get in to the department, you have to go through a juvenile core academy. And that's changed over the years because as they add new things and redesign what that looks like. I think, it could be 6 weeks up to 12 weeks, depending on which position. Because if you're just coming in straight to juvenile halls, then that's, just the minimum, I think, is 6 to 8 weeks now. And then if you go into camps, then we train you about how to do it in a camp, because in the juvenile halls, they're single locked rooms. And like I said, in the camp, it's a large dormitory. So safety and security looks different if you go into a camp. Then after that, anytime you promote, you have to go to a new core. And that's, again, 6 to 8 weeks for a supervisor. You go to a manager core when you promote to a director level. And then after that, the command college that I spoke about was something that was extra. I think that chiefs design, our chief probation officers of California had their legislative body design a curriculum for future leaders that we got to go through that. But I think after that, then it's incumbent on, the department to send to determine, which other types of investments they want to do in terms of training. I know there's National Institute of Corrections training, Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Manager training. I mean, there's so many different organizations that are out there that provide really excellent training. In fact, I just in January went to I think it changed its name to the Council of Juvenile Justice Administrators, and that's basically department heads across the nation. Because in some states, juvenile justice and child welfare are combined. And so that's where they all go to learn. And it was a week-long academy where we talked about practices across the nation in terms of the kids that are in juvenile justice facilities. And so that was a really great opportunity that I was able to be a part of this January.
So I know that you've received some training from Girls Moving On.
Oh,
I've never heard of that, and I'd like you to take a moment to share what that training was about and what they hope to, what's their mission.
So actually that was oh my gosh, and that was so long ago. It was a agency that was actually out of Canada, and Canada, for some reason, I think was one of the pioneers in terms of evidence-based practices in corrections. And so they developed a cognitive behavioral therapy that was gender specific. And it was one of the first ones, I think. Now there's several, there's girls circles, there's a bunch of different curricula, but that was one of you had to attend and be certified to be able to facilitate that cognitive behavioral therapy. And was back, I think, in 2007, 2008, that some of us, when we were supervisors at the time, got to go and learn that curriculum to help, help in our efforts to redesign our camp programs.
So do you remember anything in particular that stuck out during that training that you've carried with you to this day?
I mean, there's so many. It's really about teaching principles of effective correctional interventions, which is group facilitation. Like, how do you stand in front of a group when somebody acts out? How do you redirect it or answer? But there was another one, because when we were going through that training, there was another one that we had to do right after that, and it was called Thinking for a Change. And a lot of people are familiar with that. But what always sticks out for me in those lessons is that when you're angry, and to visualize the stop sign and count to 5, so that you give your body a chance to decompress, and then it will make you so that you don't just rush to pre-contemplation to action without having that sense of taking the time to make sure that you understand the consequence of your actions before acting on it. And I always think that was like a great example. And I'm a visual learner, and I think a lot of kids too, that if they take the time, and that's just a quick thing to do. So when you're angry, just real fast do that, and it just centralizes your central nervous system, so that you don't go to the fight or flight and act out, and have sometimes negative consequences because you didn't think about what the repercussions would be. So that's probably like the most, I think, lesson that has always stuck with me. And no matter, all those different types of trainings, that's really been part of my philosophy. So.
Well, I would imagine that takes practice, because there are so many things that can happen in a moment's notice where, human nature takes over. And so repetition is something that I know is very important in law enforcement. And when you're dealing with young people who can be emotional and they lash out verbally or physically, sometimes you don't have time to take a moment.
Yes.
So I really appreciate you sharing that. One of the things that I've been fascinated with when it comes to juvenile probation is how the young people have expressed, when they're in game changer events, how they've never had the opportunity to speak with members of law enforcement in an environment where they can speak and be heard. And what's fascinated me most about that is we've had juveniles express their desire to come back to Game Changer before we ever even make it to the game. What do you think? Why do you think that that's so valuable to them, when so many of them obviously have had some encounter with law enforcement, or else they would not be incarcerated? What do you think the thinking is behind that from the juvenile standpoint, where spending time with law enforcement without the game is so important to them?
I think it's, and they don't necessarily say it in this way, but it's really just because it gives them a voice and they're not in a position where some of them, probably had a negative experience with law enforcement where they're making fast decisions. They're for their own safety and the safety of the people, they're handcuffing them until they could sort things out and those types of things. So, those are usually, if that's your only interaction with law enforcement, it's very negative, and you're gonna keep thinking that, and every time you see somebody, it's similar to any type of you have a negative experience with anybody, and so your amygdala remembers that, and every time you see that person, it's gonna cause this reaction and physical reaction within you. And so I think sitting down and having the opportunity to hear from them, and actually I remember the first Game Changer, and I'd actually transported one of the kids when I was in the community and on the way home, and that's basically what he said, is that I had a voice, and I didn't know that that's how they felt, and I didn't know that they did that. They handcuffed me, because they had it was unsafe for them, or they didn't know at the time. They didn't know me. They didn't know they could trust me. Those types of things. And so I think really just giving in the voice was like mind-boggling to them.
Have you seen the change? We're dealing with COVID-19 now, and they're talking about clinical trials in a placebo group. Has probation done any type of research that shows improved behavior change and more permanent behavior change with groups of youths that have had more interactions that were communicative and verbal and enrichment experiences, things that Game Changer provides, and those that don't? Have any studies been done to demonstrate that this is the best practice where they've had a control group?
We haven't, our experience working with you has been, just recent. And so I do know that you guys do a lot of work around that. Every time we take kids out, we do a survey, and, we usually use a Likert scale. A sad face is 0 and a happy face is 10. And I haven't seen one where it was below a 10. And so, I think that that's just a great event that they love to have those new experiences, to see it, not even just law enforcement, but to see adults that really care about them and engage with them and give them that voice. I think that's been really positive as well.
So Chief, you've been in probation for the better part of 20 years. What have been the most gratifying experiences and occurrences that have taken place for you over the past 20 years where you say to yourself, what, I'm so glad I got into this line of work?
Yeah, actually, I have a story. I work with one of the community-based organization called Homeboy Industries, and a lot of people know them because Father Greg Boyle started that group, and his motto is jobs not bullets, or jobs not guns. And so he does a lot of work in the community. And when I was promoted, I was going to the camps a lot, and there was one particular camp, they had the older kids, and there was a lot of fights all the time. And so, I went there and I started working there. My first weekend, I think I actually worked the line there with the staff, and I met a lot of the kids. And there's this one kid, and I remember I told him, if you don't get in any trouble, and because I knew his birthday was coming up, and I think it was like 2 weeks, and every week it seemed like something, he was getting in some type of trouble. And I would pull him aside, have a conversation with him, and I said, I'll bring you a birthday cake. And so I did. And he eventually got out, and his probation officer got him actually connected to Homeboy Industries to get him a job after, to help him finish his education, those types of things. And I went there to go tour one of their new prospective sites for a reentry center so that we could send more kids, so that they had that available to them. And the minute I walked in the door, I hear somebody yell, "Miss Kaufman, Miss Kaufman." And it was this young man, and that just, it makes it all worth it. You may have some negative, and you say like, what happened? You were doing so good, but it's that one time where you see them in the community, and they're happy to see you and appreciative, and it makes it all worth it.
Yeah, people don't forget someone who demonstrated that they cared, because a lot of people come to work, and I'm not saying that this is anybody within your department or at your camps, but it's easy to get caught up into this is a job. And young people in particular don't forget adults that treated them as an equal and acted like they cared. And I think that's a wonderful story. And it really does take me back to my coaching days where extrinsic rewards work with some people. You know, you look at athletes who are highly competitive, and these guys making $10 million a year will do anything for a t-shirt, you know, if it means that they did something that someone else didn't do and they were able to earn this t-shirt. And you dangled, so to speak, a carrot. If you behave, I'll get you a birthday cake. And for all you knew, he didn't care about a birthday cake, but evidently he did. And I can really relate to you reaching out to that young person in that way, and them remembering you and thanking you for caring about them. When I look at young people today, I see a lot of them are gravitating toward doing community service, doing things for people that they don't know. Is part of the behavior change model within the department, does it include allowing the youth to serve the community in some capacity while they're in the camps?
Yeah, so we have had some community service externally that's done. I went with some girls around the holiday. Oh, I think it was the Thanksgiving holiday, and we passed out meals to the homeless. But I would definitely like to increase that. One of the other things is I'm trying to get people that have been in the system and, you know, have changed their lives to want to come back and, you know, coach kids, come back and play basketball, have a conversation with the kids. So we're trying to release some work orders to have people with lived experiences come in and mentor youth when they go back into the community. And I think you know, I think it's good for both ends. You know, it uplifts people that have been in places where they can, you know, release that hurt and all those things and give back to somebody else. And then for those people, they can see like, oh, this person had the same experience as me, and give them that opportunity to, once they get in the community, do the same things as that person and get jobs, get a good job, give back to their community so that, you know, they break the cycles of whatever's holding them back.
Well, now that I know you're interested in doing that, you know, whenever I had a chance, I would send you an email and provide more enrichment opportunities for the youth. I'm going to do my part to connect you with some of the organizations, some of the teams that we're working with, so that we can provide you with some choices in terms of volunteer and community service opportunities for the youth. I'd love to do that if possible. I hope we get out of this stay-at-home situation sooner rather than later, but count on us to be a resource for you to bring that about. I really feel strongly about that. If we can help out, we will.
Awesome.
One of the last questions I wanted to ask you, Chief, is, with you being such a caring person as it relates to behavior change and rehabilitating these young people, what organizations are you personally involved in that you can share with us and give a shout out to here in the Los Angeles community?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. You know, I just had Urban Strategies reach out to us. They're doing some visual training, Arts for Incarcerated Youth Network, Brotherhood Crusade. They bring so many resources. George Weaver and his team, AC Green, the famous Laker, comes and works with our kids all the time. Helpline Youth. There's just so many. I mean, you know, we're just really blessed and fortunate to benefit from all these people in their own communities. So I'm sure there's so many more I'm missing that I feel terrible about, but those are the ones that just come to my mind right off the bat.
And so those are the organizations that work with the probation department, correct? I was asked, I'm asking you, do you and your family have any particular nonprofits that you give your personal time to, if you have any personal time to give?
Yeah, I would say that's not a choice for me right now, but you know, I think what I like to do more is do personal donations for people that need it. You know, now with social media connecting us all, you'll hear about a tragedy of, some story.
Right.
So I like
Yep.
to give back in that way. I definitely wish I had more time, but majority of any of my free time spent, when I can go to facilities and just help out in that respect.
Well, I can respect that, Chief. And I want to thank you for joining us today. And I'm hoping that we can do this at some other point. Is there a website you can share for people who want to learn more about the probation department and how they may be able to gain employment with the probation department?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we are hiring. It's probation, .lacounty.gov.
Chief, thanks so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care.
Bye bye.